Well, howdy, everyone, and welcome back to the Rancher Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I know it's been a while since the last episode. I had a change in jobs, and so I've been trying to get back into that. Then, of course, holidays came and went, and so I hope you all enjoyed the end of 2021 and had a great Christmas and a happy New Year. And I'm sorry that I had to take a little bit of time off, but I'm really looking forward to getting back into this. And what better way than to finish off the story of Teddy Roosevelt and his ranch in the Dakota Territory. I really am looking forward to 2022. We're going to have plenty more episodes on history. I just finished a great book given to me by my father-in-law about a ranch in the Panhandle area of Texas, and I'd like to get into the story of that. I also am going to be starting a new series here pretty quick on the Yellowstone 1883 TV show and some of the history that it covers. So be looking forward to that as well. I know a lot of you guys have probably been watching that show along with the latest season of the original Yellowstone. So really excited to get into some history that covers and hoping to bring more guests on in 2022. So if you have anybody that you'd like me to talk to, please feel free to reach out. Again, you can always DM me on Instagram, Facebook, or email me at therancherpodcast@gmail.com. So today, like I said, we're going to get into essentially the legacy of Roosevelt's ranch in the Badlands. We've kind of covered the history of what happened there, how he got involved, his early life, and we're going to wrap this series up. But before we get into that, of course, we want to hear a word from our them did not. So this cavalry unit was really more of a infantry unit by the time they saw action. But he sold his cattle and a lot of his stuff to help finance this division because, of course, like I said, he was getting a lot of pushback from the military on getting his own command and whatnot. So by 1898, he had sold all the cattle, but he still had the land. And then a few short years later, in 1901, he was serving as the vice president to President McKinley, who was unfortunately assassinated. And Roosevelt became president in 1901. So really hard, of course, to continue to manage a ranching operation or anything of that sort once you become president. And he really didn't look back after that 1898 sale of his cattle. Roosevelt's life is incredibly interesting. We've gone over kind of his first 20 years in this podcast because I wanted to set the scene for the reasons why he went west. There are countless stories. Obviously, the Battle of San Juan Hill is a huge one. There's also his tour up the river to try and find a passageway in South America. The Panama Canal, all these things. Obviously, his presidencies, the starting of the Bull Moose Party, the attempted assassination. His life was absolutely incredible, but it didn't really have anything else to do with ranching, so we're not going to go over that much of those parts. But what we will talk about is his impact on conservancy of American lands and, the impact of the national parks system and all those kinds of things. So, he became an avid conservationist because of his early travel, his hunting, and his ranching in the Badlands. And he also became friends with a man named George Grinnell, who was kind of an early American conservationist. And between his experiences and that friendship, he worked to establish the national park system, the federal lands, everything of that sort. And, following his death in 1919, the Little Missouri Badlands, as they were called, were actually looked at for a national park site. And fast forward a few years to the 1930s when the Civilian Conservation Corps under President FDR was in full force to try and get men back to work during the Depression, they actually built camps in the area of where Roosevelt's Elkhorn and Maltese Cross Ranch were. And, they developed the roads that were there and all these things to make it a destination, a site for you to come and, see some of America's most beautiful land. And it was designated the Roosevelt Recreation Demonstration Area in 1935. And then finally in 1946, it was actually transferred over to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And that's when it got the name the Theodore Roosevelt National Wildlife Refuge. But then finally, it was established as the National Memorial Park in 1947. And of course, now it holds that name. And it's one of the only national parks that is a memorial. But of course, they've now changed the name to the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. Now, I will tell you, I've never been to Medora. My father has quite a few times. He's from North Dakota, and I plan on going as soon as I can because everything I've seen, it looks like an absolutely great place to go for, a weekend or even longer if you enjoy hiking in our national parks, because the town of Medora still exists and it essentially transports you back to those triumphal days when, the men and cattle dominated this area. So if you ever want to, you can go up there and they have a really fun musical show called Medora, which kind of tells the story of the founding of the town with the Marquis de Moray and Teddy Roosevelt's time there. And it's just a really cool show that you got to catch if you're ever in town. Typically, obviously, the weather has to be good. So this area is not really very active until the late spring, early or through summer, because of course, North Dakota winters can get pretty cold. But you can also do cool things like eat a deep fried ribeye that they actually cook in a giant cauldron of grease that they stick your ribeye on a pitchfork. And you can also visit cabins on the ranches, such as the Maltese Cross. You can also visit the Chateau de Moray, which was the Marquis Ranch House, and it's perfectly restored and preserved. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do on top of going out into the actual national park and seeing the pronghorns and the bison and other local wildlife. So I would definitely recommend, as I recommend to myself, I want to get out there as soon as I can to experience this unique time in American history and in ranching history. But, the impact that Teddy Roosevelt had on the state and the reason for the national park and whatnot is to kind of acknowledge this, very beautiful part of the United States. And so another part of the story, of course, is that Teddy Roosevelt ran for re-election, and it's as president. It's interesting that the people of the Dakota territories actually viewed him as their favorite son candidate, which is typically a honor reserved for people from your state. But he had left such an impact that this New York-born Yankee, dandy, if you will, was the favorite son candidate of the Dakotas because of his time there and his experience as this livestock club and committee's chairman. So while Roosevelt really wasn't in the Badlands that long, the impact that he had there brought so much to America. I mean, I think about it today. We might not have national parks. We might not have certain species that are iconic, such as the buffalo, because they were almost hunted to extinction. And it was his foresight and his ability to learn from what you should definitely call mistakes, because early on, of course, he was a hunter that he set off to go hunt out there because he was worried that these animals were going to go extinct and that he wouldn't have a chance. I mean, the thinking on that is just absolutely backwards. And it's just, I'm so thankful that he was willing to learn from those mistakes and, learn from conservationists such as Grinnell and become a champion of conservation. So I think that the big legacy of Teddy Roosevelt, of course, are our national parks, but I also think that he has a legacy of being a lifelong learner. So, of course, I believe, that the biggest legacy that Roosevelt had in America is the national park system. But I think that a personal legacy that I learned from him is that you should always strive to be a lifelong learner. He learned from his experiences, he learned from other people, and he, used his knowledge and experiences to. So I think that, of course, the largest legacy that Teddy Roosevelt has. While without a doubt, Theodore Roosevelt's biggest impact on our nation and our world is the national park system. That was something that had never been seen or done in any other country. I think a more personal impact that he had on me was that he taught me that you should be a lifelong learner. From a young age, he was a voracious reader. He loved to do experiments and learn everything he could about the animals around him, even in a city like New York City. And he continued to push forward and learn from, his own mistakes, his own, shortcomings as an environmentalist and conservationist, and, turn that around to where his legacy is one of the reasons that we still have animals such as the buffalo, and we have beautiful sites like our national parks. So I think that the big lesson that I want us all to learn from Theodore Roosevelt's life is that you should continue to put yourself out there to learn, to immerse yourself in what you're passionate about, and try and better our world and our nation and your own communities. So I thank Theodore Roosevelt for that, and for his impact not only on the Dakota Territory and our nation, but also our world. And so I would encourage you to go and read more details about his time in the White House and post-White House, because it's certainly some colorful stories, but I'll leave that to another podcaster who focuses more on U.S. history. But I appreciate you coming and listening to part 3 of the Teddy Roosevelt story. And until next time, God bless and Godspeed.